Ned Stratton, who is from UCOVI and Action BI. And Ned has over 8 years' experience as a data professional in finance, events, publishing, and politics. He believes that in an era of AI, human-driven judgment, innovation, decision-making, and creativity will become more, not less important. Ned is an all-round nerd.
No, please keep going. This is like best man speech.
All-round nerd that makes time for acrylic painting and a girlfriend.
Yeah, thanks.
So without further ado, I will welcome Ned to the stage.
Right. I'm mic'd up. Thanks, Becky. Thanks to everyone here. Thanks to the sponsors. Right, let's crack on. Let's get everything where it should be. Okay, so I'm going to talk about how to have fun with data and Python and why you should do it, and kind of like what the best libraries are in Python for exploratory. The mic all right? Yeah, I think it should be for exploratory feedback, for exploratory data analysis and personal portfolio building. Okay, so UCOVI is my own brand and website, and I have a data viz gallery, I have a blog, I have a calendar for meetup groups online and based in the London area. And Action Business Intelligence is the company that I work for as a consultant, working for clients in the nuclear industry, in construction, project management, and also and pet care as well. That's the alligator barcode is for UCOVI, so you can see what I'm about. I would describe myself as a data analyst and rehabilitated arts graduate, and my rehabilitation has taken about 8 years, and my kind of the methadone to my arts graduate heroin has been Power BI, SQL, Python, PowerShell, and Excel. So I'm slowly morphing from a kind of have-a-go political philosopher who can write a bit of code into kind of someone that can and does manage big and small analytics solutions across different industries. And I think while you're doing kind of serious analytical projects in the coding languages that you're using, it's important to use data and learn with data in the coding languages that support it, of which Python is a very important one of many to have fun and maintain your kind of sense of individual brand. And kind of the way I do that is I want to answer questions and then set myself a challenge of seeing if I can find any data that will solve the questions, and then visualize them in Power BI. But Python does a lot of the heavy lifting in this. My talk's going to focus heavily on Python, which is going to knit it into the kind of relevant subject matter for Data Science Festival. But let's start with some questions. When was UK politics last not in crisis mode? Well, I'd say, based on the transcripts of all of the debates in Prime Minister's questions every Wednesday from the last 25 years, if you scrape it, get it off their API and transfer it into things called into a single word frequency analysis and n-grams, so bigrams and trigrams, you can basically come up with how many times crisis and emergency gets mentioned by the Prime Minister, the Leader of the Opposition, and backbenchers at PMQs. And I'd say the last time we were not in crisis was 2003 to 2006, the kind of like heyday of the Blair years. And you can see obviously the huge spike in 2020 was the pandemic. Okay, another politics question. How long do politicians blame the previous government for? Again, same technique, same database. It's one term. So what we're looking at is kind of like when the Labour government comes in, it spends 4 years blaming the previous John Major's Conservative administration until it gets re-elected in 2001, and then kind of realises, oh, we were the previous government. And so did the Conservative Party. But the trend kind of slowly bleeds out after 5 years, because that was how long that term was. And then you see kind of it really dies down until 2022, when I think Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak really start clutching at straws. to blame the previous Labour government 13 years ago. But the kind of like the you hear that on the news. You hear everyone saying, "Oh, under the previous administration, we had a budget deficit of X, X, X." And I was like, you know now that lasts for a term. That's and that's what maybe Keir Starmer will do. Another question, different subject. Is Waitrose a positive indicator for car accidents and outstanding schools? Car accidents first. Okay, so on the left, you've got every branch of Waitrose and Little Waitrose by geocoordinate, not including the service stations, because that's going to skew the point I'm making. On the right-hand side, you've got all the road accidents from the GovUK Transport Department from 2017 to 2019. And I think there is correlation here. So the first correlation, if you have a look at the southeast, so Cornwall and Devon, there's a very sparse distribution of Waitroses, but a very heavy cluster of the road accidents. Wonder what's happening there. I think the English middle classes are taking their beach houses and going surfing in Cornwall. They're driving down, they've run out of Parmesan. And they realise there's no Waitrose here. Where are we going to do the shopping? So what they do is they just start frantically driving back up to Bristol and crashing their cars into each other, just out of sheer panic. Okay, now the other bit of correlation is I put like a yellow rectangle, which is again a kind of, you've got like a strong, I don't know, Shire's wall of Waitroses, and then a kind of complete blank area of crashes. So that's obviously in that area the Waitroses are protecting the citizens of those areas against road accidents through, I don't know what, maybe all the nice food in there is a kind of calming influence which promotes good driving, I don't know. On the schools, there's definitely a correlation between schools to their nearest Waitrose. So schools rated outstanding by Ofsted are on average 9.7 kilometres from their nearest Waitrose, and then good schools are 12 kilometres away, and they're less than good are 13 kilometres away. Again, all of this answerable from web scraping, Python, and open data. Maybe a bit question more relevant, some of you guys, is data analytics a feeder role for data science, software, and IT? To answer that, I scraped 10,000 LinkedIn profiles from LinkedIn that were members of data analytics interest groups, and basically did a Sankey diagram using Plotly to look at who are the data analysts with at least enough experience to qualify them as a data analyst, and what was their second job move and their third job move, or their first and their second job move, and where they're at now. And you can see quite an interesting trend of maybe 50% of the data analysts stay as data analysts, or are still data analysts. And then between that, there's 25% and 25% going into an array of more, possibly you might say more specialist and advanced data and IT roles, such as data engineering, data science. Few of them are becoming managers, few of them becoming software developers, but a lot of them everyone else going back into the other roles, which is essentially just business roles, but also business analyst, which is possibly a bridging role between the business's data and the business meaning, so more advisory than coding, and that makes sense, and it's kind of like, well, gives I know UK economy policymakers a question. Well, how do we or even business leaders, what are we doing with their data teams? Where are they going? Why are they data analysts, and where do they expect to go in our business afterwards? So it's kind of interesting and useful, but just from curiosity and open data again. And I suppose the last question: who's the biggest pandemic villain? Was it Dominic Cummings or Matt Hancock? So again, this is Google Trends searches for coronavirus or COVID search terms between January 2020 and 2022, when it didn't stop, but the other stories took over. And you can see, like, the pink spike is Matt Hancock's inability to maintain social distancing on camera, and the brown spike is Dominic Cummings getting his eye tested at Barnard Castle. And there's also, I mean, at the time we thought it was good, there's a lot of green spikes for Captain Tom doing a big NHS fundraiser for his daughter's extension. And I'll come back to the porn line. That's kind of as a proportion of search terms going on for porn. Yeah, which allows you to kind of like see, is this just tiny small beans or is this the whole internet blowing up over it? There's 3 people are searching for Matt Hancock snogging his advisor as they offer porn, so kind of I don't know. But what have all these got in common? These are all sources of data that's not ready for you in a warehouse or a data lake, unstructured data or semi-structured data, or data that you've got to do a bit of work to clean up and make sense of to answer the question that you want to have, or that you have or that you want to answer. And so my main sources, as I've just mentioned, I've scraped LinkedIn, used the Google Trends API, found all the geocoordinates of all the English branches of Waitrose, excluding the service stations, and gone through the last 25 years of Hansard transcripts, which write down everything that's said in PMQs, and gave it on different web pages on the Parliament website, but now serves it up in an API. And so to kind of get all of this data, it can all be done with Python, but you just need to have a case for doing it and to know the libraries to use in Python. And I'm going to kind of run through what these libraries are. And I've got some screenshotted code of how I've implemented them for these projects, and I'll give a link to my GitHub later. But to get all of this data and answer all these questions using Python, which is I'm visualizing a lot in Power BI, and that has I need to write some code in DAX and Power Query to make that work. But Python is doing 90% of the heavy lifting to pull all this data and clean it up. To do this, you need to analyze and process the text. Python gives you the NLTK library, which is the natural language toolkit, and that gives you advanced capability to process text as speech or text as written as essay or books into structured linguistic elements such as single words or n-grams, which are commonly occurring sequences of 2, 3, or 4, or however many you want. RE is Python's regex library, which really helps you validate and clean up data and categorize it. Getting all of the LinkedIn job roles that I did was basically just an enormous regex statement to kind of clean up all the variants of data analyst, scientist, and manager. Web scraping, really important skill, and Python is your best friend for this, and it gives you Selenium and BS4, and I put requests in there because the first part of getting the web data is basically is the request library, which also does all the API work for you. Geodistance calculation, a really neat library to just allow you to plug geocoordinates in and compare the distance between them quickly. That's GOPY. And for using the Google Trends data, which the front end, you can basically just type queries into the Google Trends front end, but in terms of downloading that over a long period of time, you run into a quick limitation. There's an open source Python library for that called PyTrends, which relies on Panda. And then, of course, if you want to just generate your own data sets, which you read into BI tool afterwards, you need to be able to read in and out of CSVs and TXT. And so I'll just cover the CSV in the open function as well. So just on the APIs, how did I get all the transcripts from Hansard? Scrape the older stuff, but now it's provided in in their API, and Python has a very simple to use library called requests. You just import requests and just run. Usually, you run the get function on request to get your API. There is another one called HTTP client, which is quicker than request in terms of performance, but you need to do more coding to kind of like configure. And I've usually had to use that for ones where I've had to authenticate into the API before getting it back. That allows you to kind of like specify the authentication token and then use that for now and then actually get the data. But request is the first one to go for. Use HTTP client if you can't use request, because request gives you you call the .get function from request, and that's my first highlighted green line on line 13, and that will give you the data object of the API call or the web page that you're getting. It'll also give you a response code, usually 200 if it's been successful, or 404 if it's been an error. And then you can start working with the request data. Another element of my PMQ's data job was cleaning up the transcript data I got from the API. So there's the API endpoint is base link, get your debate, and then you get a big JSON data structure of all of the speeches that happened to that debate as an event, and who gave the speech and what political party they were. That comes with its own complications. You'll have non-natural language bits in there, like, I don't know, Rachel Reeves, MP for whatever, said this. You've got to scrape out the MP because that's going to appear in your text analysis later. And you've also got to, the data has little bracketed references where someone's referring to a statistic they'll give or referring to what someone else said in a different debate, and then the Parliament API will give you that as a link. You've got to kind of scrape all that out. And regex, so the import RE library, is the way that you do that. And I think a lot of people, one of my other party tricks apart from this is to give a 50-minute talk on why regex is awesome, how you can learn it. I don't get to run New Year's parties with party tricks like that, but this is about 5 days worth of work, find and replace in Excel. Regex is really powerful with cleaning up and categorizing data. Again, regex did this, and it did my data analysis piece from LinkedIn. Once you've cleaned up your natural language text data and you've taken out all the non-natural language speech, natural language figures, phrase, and other bits in the data set, you can process it into things which are more useful to spot trends in than big long essays. And I think there's all of the speeches from 1997 to present day in PMQs is about 48,000 data points as speeches, and each one of those will have maybe possibly 100 to 250 words in them, depending on who's saying it. So that all needs to be broken down into kind of like words and common phrases. Again, Python's in its element here with natural language toolkit, and that gives you three valuable things. It gives you a sentence tokenizer, and a word tokenizer, so that you read in data as a speech, and it breaks it down into the sentences and the single words. So I keep doing that. It also gives you n-grams, so you can take a sentence and break it down into with n being a number. So a bigram is how many all the two-word sequences in a sentence, the trigrams, all the three-word sentences, and so on. So I put down at the bottom n-grams 2. The bigrams of the dog barked would be the dog and dog barked. But also two other really useful things for analysing language data: stemming and lemmatization. All the imports for this are on line 2 here of the screenshotted code. But stemming basically means finding a word and reducing it to its bare bones stems, and basically, even if the word's a verb, you always get it down to the noun. So, criticised is a critic criticises, or criticised, or will criticise. So that's the stem. Lemmatization is a bit of a halfway. It's not quite as extreme as that. It's you kind of you identify the verb and then you get it down to its infinitive form. And my function is basically something called smart lemma, where for the purposes of analysis and analysing the Parliament data, I wanted to just have I wanted to lemmatise just the verbs and the nouns. I didn't want to lemmatise the adjectives back down to their root nouns, because that's an important part of language, kind of like adjective verb. Again, the natural language toolkit allows you to make these decisions. How did I do the Waitrose data? that's not available in an API, but so if it's not available in an API, but it is on a website, web scraping. Sorry for those taking photos. Python's opening library for this is Beautiful Soup, supported by requests. So if you want to get a web page, you put the web link into a request, which is on line 7. So I'm getting the start link, any link for Waitrose, and then just calling the text from that. And then you run Beautiful Soup on the text with LXML as an argument to parse the text. And then you can find you can give that argument as well. Like once you've got a Beautiful Soup object of web text, you can look for all the HTML elements within it, such as divs, images, spans, whatever, and you can search it by class. And a good tip for kind of getting from kind of like good beginner to intermediate, or from intermediate from advanced as a data analyst and scientist, is to get comfortable with HTML and CSS if you want to kind of unlock reams of open data that you can use for projects. So that's Beautiful Soup for elementary web scraping. Going to come back to advanced web scraping in a minute. For the outstanding schools and for the car crashes, the car crash data had geo-coordinates in them. The Waitrose data didn't, but I could calculate the geo-coordinates of Waitrose's postcodes using a postcode lookup table. I've given the link for that, and then you can use GeoPy to basically, for a source and a destination, compare the long and lat of both, and give you an answer of how far they are from each other in kilometres. That's how I was able to see how many outstanding schools were near or far from their nearest Waitrose. And not many lines of code there to implement GeoPy. For LinkedIn, you can use a simple request statement and Beautiful Soup to scrape a static web page where it just loads all the HTML for you straight up. A lot of the more advanced web pages have say dynamic division. So you load to the bottom, and then that triggers the next 30 rows to be loaded, say on something like, I don't know, a holiday comparison website. And that makes it harder because you don't get everything you want on the first request call. So you have to get code to take control of the browser, to keep expanding the browser to get to the end of the data and tell it when to stop when it's reached the end. You need to use Selenium for this. So for the LinkedIn's, I actually use something open source just to get the profile links from the group. So I use Phantom Buster. That's only getting me links, but to work out which data analysts are doing what now and who's leaving when, I needed the dates of all of their employment history from their profile pages, and I needed their job titles. So and LinkedIn's a bit the more bigger the website and the more defensive the organisation hosting it, the more they'll spot web scrapers and block them as hackers. So I had to use Selenium to log me in 3 more times, so that using burner profiles, and then and line 11's the rand sleeper. So I'm basically just calling a random function to say, do this one, then wait a random increment of 15, 13, 14, however many seconds, until I've done about 250 profiles in 10 minutes. And I just did. I eventually got to 10,000 by doing 750 a day for, I don't know what the maths is on that, but it was definitely a labour of love. And then all this code is basically just logging me into my LinkedIn profile or to another burner LinkedIn profile, waiting, looking at profile link up, scraping their job title off, putting it in a file, and then waiting, and then doing it again. And I put in the top right-hand side is a bit of a clumsy slide, but that's the Selenium WebDriver libraries that you read in to do those operations. And at the bottom is the kind of Tech Ninja mode, is where you hide the normally you see the Chrome browsers being open and shut as your code's opening and scraping them, but you can use headless mode to hide them. And you can also you need to download something called a Chrome WebDriver to drive Chrome with Python, and that's a library that makes sure it's always up to date because Chrome always updates itself. Speed up. I think we're making good time. But finally, have I searched Google Trends for my Dominic Cummings and Matt Hancock? This is Google Trends, and you can type in different search terms and compare them between a certain time. So this is my initial question was, when did we stop saying coronavirus and start saying COVID? That answered that, and then I was like, well, what about all the other stuff? But with the front end, which you just access from Trends, you can only do 5 at once against each other, and you can only do and you can get it out as CSV, but you have to. But if you want, say, 2 years worth, you then only get like monthly increments of the changes in popularity. So that's not really. I wanted a bit more than that. So the front end's a bit limited for me. And also, if I'm only doing 5, I'm only comparing them against each other. If I then do another 5, I have no idea how my second 5 compare against my first 5. So that's where the kind of porn constant came in. I kind of like Googled that and saw that it was a flat line. And the library for this is an open source library written by a guy on GitHub called General Mills called PyTrends. You just need to have pandas installed. PyTrends builds on pandas to scrape, to do a query against Google Trends at any time increment for up to 5 searches, and then it reads it into a pandas data frame for you. And my method for that was I would do each of them, but I would do batches of 4 with porn. And then, so for all my batches, I'd be able to calculate its coefficient against porn to basically just measure it all against each other and see the constant line, and then get 20 different search terms for Google Analytics against each other on a dashboard, which was really neat. And also, other people asked me, were like, "Well, actually, you've done it for that. I could do it for, say, Google Trends data on all the products that I'm." Say if you want a PR or something like that, for all the one guy wanted to do it for all the Power BI training courses he was marketing, to see the kind of like changes in, see if he could find any change in popularity for them, and he had 30 live courses. So he indicated to me that he actually needed this. So I was quite pleased. And finally, I can't mention open source data without giving a slide into. To run data back into a CSV or read it from a CSV. And for that, you use just a with open statement, which opens a file in read or write mode and gives it a character encoding. And then you can use a CSV to kind of loop through a list to write each row to a CSV and determine whether it's tab or comma delimited. So those are all of the libraries that I've used in my stuff to get a broad and deep portfolio going of public data that I can answer questions with and keep building portfolio work for. Here's all the libraries. They're just repeating the first slide so that we're summarising. But I suppose that's the how. Then there's the why, or the kind of method, or the ways to come up with ideas for your own stuff. I see 2 ways. I think you're either data set driven or idea driven. So when people are trying to find their own coding projects or build their own portfolios, the kind of default options for them will be what's it called, Kaggle, I think, where you can go in and just contribute to try and download some public data and then run a data science algorithm over it. A lot of user groups do competitions at the start. So I go to a Power BI user group in London. Every month they give a vanilla data set for everyone to work on. That's good, but it can be quite hard. Your first reaction to a data set is usually kind of intimidation. It's like, what do I do with this? What are the interesting columns? And how am I going to put my stamp on it? And actually, there's a society for this called the Data Visualization Society that run an award ceremony called the Information is Beautiful Awards and do a state of the industry survey. It's behind a paywall now, so I can't get the stats. But they say that ideation is the thing that takes data viz designers and creatives the hardest things. The hardest thing is actually just coming up with the idea when faced with a data set that intimidates them and doesn't give them initial clues. So the idea-driven approach is where you're interested in something and you think, well, actually, I'll set myself the initial challenge of seeing what data I can answer, seeing what data's out there and how can I get it and how can I work with it. And it's not always given to you in a spreadsheet or a database. Sometimes you have to scrape it and you have to get it and clean it and put it in, especially with text data, get it as close as possible to a category and number format from big essays. And that's those are the two approaches. The dataset driven is your existing data set, your idea, then the execution, which is, I think, what's most common. But what's possibly what I'm advocating for, what I'm recommending, and possibly you'll find is, what's your idea? You then gather it and then you execute it that way, and that's how I've done my stuff. But what I will say, for the people who want to stick with dataset driven, there's dataisplural.com is a best kept secret of very different data sets. I mean, I found some amazing stuff in there. There's like European street names, trends in European street names, what by each country they're naming their big city streets after philosophers, doctors, or war heroes. There's also a transcript database of ransomware attack conversations. We've ransomware attacked you. What are you going to do about it? I mean, I'd love to make time to analyse that and just see what the sentiment analysis is on that and see how it kind of goes from like, oh my god, to yeah, we'll just pay. And like, how do you do a personal portfolio? How do you use Python to it? Why do it? I see 4 convincing reasons to do it, and this is why I do it. My own learning and development kind of helps me helps me practice and learn new stuff and try it out away from the pressure of a deadline. Keeping your hand in, I think what I mean by this is, as data scientist or analyst, you might be consumed in your main job by a very long project, and you'll be working on the skill sets to support that project. So say over July and August, I was on automating basically just migrating reports from a report server into a procedure which actually just scraped them as SQL queries and used Python to email them to everyone. I'm using some of my skills to do that, but in that time I'm also forgetting how to use APIs and how to write good DAX and how to web scrape data. So if you're doing personal stuff, you're kind of reminding yourself how to do those things as well. So you're not at a standing start on your next project if those are the requirements of it. It's obviously a display of keenness and interest. It's so much more satisfying to just say, I don't have a CV, here's my website. I coded that. Don't need to expand on that anymore. It's good to have a blog. And this is my favourite one, sanity. I think the French philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau in The Social Contract in the 18th century said that man is born free and yet everywhere is in chains. Jean-Jacques Rousseau. And as I think as data people, data scientists and analysts, there are 2 things chaining us up in our main jobs as well. There's the kind of banal null hypothesis of our business stakeholders saying, no, it's definitely that, investigate that. That's not important, kind of like setting the parameters to all the work that you do. And there's also the second thing that chains us up is the IT systems of the companies that we do our main jobs in. You kind of can't quite, got to wait for the admin privileges to get all the libraries you want installed. You've got, you're just kind of like waiting on things, and you kind of, and I know they might have a BI tool that, or might not be willing to invest in the extra bits of, software or whatever that kind of like really support the advanced stuff. So those are the constraints that you have to work around. When you're doing your own portfolio, the only constraints you have are your own time and money, and you can come up with some really interesting ideas and amazing things by doing that. And why should you use Python for that? Python's done the heavy lifting in all of my stuff. I've chosen to use it because it's open source. It can be downloaded. Don't have to kind of like pay too much to do it, or sign up to too many mailing lists. It's powerful, well supported, and widely used. Great batch of Stack Overflow posts for it, and thriving communities. It's similar structures. A real good entry for me as in my arts and humanities graduate rehabilitation is it's taught me essentially all the kind of things I need to think about to become a programmer, and actually led me into other similar scripting languages and languages for the web, like PowerShell and JavaScript. It's again similar. It's taught me like what classes and functions are, and how to abstract things into classes as well. And also Jupyter notebooks lend themselves to Python. They're a really good way of exploring data and testing out mini functions. And it gives you approaches and gives the ability to generate data sets that you can share the insights of or share directly with others, and can recycle for secondary insights. And that's what I do as well as someone who does his own stuff. I kind of like with the Parliament data, I'm like, well, I've answered that question. What can I come up with an animation of the key buzzwords is over 20 years, so I could see in live how the political conversation is changing over 20 years, and found some really amazing stuff. The Cameron era, they literally said long-term economic plan in Parliament for 2 years on the trot, and you think actually that was quite a kind of a high point in discipline, and you see the kind of times of turbulence and ill-discipline where the language changes constantly. So that's my kind of call to inspiration, is to kind of like do your own stuff and use Python to do it, and think what data's out there for my topic of interest, and just go and get it. So thanks for listening, and I've put the Parliament stuff and the LinkedIn stuff on my GitHub. I've got a link to my LinkedIn and my website again with the alligator. So thanks. Any questions?
Brilliant, that was fab. Thank you, Ned. Lovely. Is there any questions for Ned? He's got a question. Yeah. You hold it right up.
I think I speak on behalf of everyone. That's really, really funny and quite fun to listen to. Probably one of the most fun ones I've heard in quite some time. Just a quick question. How do you go about thinking about how to link some of the data profiles, and how you actually go through that thought process of, if I connect this and this? How do you actually think about it?
I'm a really weird guy. Yeah. But it goes to a certain amount of pain. It's kind of like just a bit of tenacity as well. So you get given a data set, you're like, oof, that one, and then it's like kind of, and then you allow yourself for that to be the initial reaction. But then you might just keep trying to hold it in the back of your mind for a bit, and eventually you might be like, I can probably do something with that, or that, and then eventually comes. So an example of that, the last one I was like kind of. The last Power BI dataset challenge was for London Power BI user group was our world in data's energy usage stats by country over the past 50 years. So kind of which countries are transitioning to which energy. And I was like, the environment again, like everything's through the prism of kind of like climate change now, isn't it? So I was like, no, that's my initial reaction. But then the next I was like, well, how do I do that on Power BI? And then I was looking at another Power BI dashboard, and I was like, I like all the custom visuals are named after some kind of energy. So there's a tornado chart, a sunburst chart, a waterfall chart, and stuff like that. And I was like, actually, do you know what I'm going to do is I'm going to map all of the energy sources to the custom visual names, even if they make no sense, even if it's a dreadful way to display that data. So the waterfall chart for water hydration users looks, people be like, nah, what's that? That's not the way you do it for your head of marketing. But I was like, it made sense in a kind of broader pitch of like making the environment fun, a custom visual for every data source. And I even went so far as saying, well, climate change can be a bit melodramatic sometimes. Let's get the violins out. And I did a violin chart for all the distributions of all of them. And then, sadly, I never got to present it because they actually forgot they're doing the challenge that week. But I was like, that's good. Then I'm happy with that. And I sent it off and got nominated, got long-listed for a visualization award. So just be, I suppose, patient and allow yourself to be infuriated by your initial boredom. And then but don't rule out doing something with it later, and the creativity will come.
Thank you. Thank you. Your thought process is very inspiring, actually.
Cheers.
Brilliant. Any more questions? No? Brilliant. Thanks, Ned. Let's give it. Ned.
Cheers. Thanks, guys. Thanks.